ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Bull City Coordinators Duke Football Coverage Podcast. As you know, we are part of the College Huddle Network, and you can look forward to hopefully some interesting College Huddle collaborations this coming season. Now, check us out at our website, bullcitycoordinators.com. Please call and leave a voicemail. You know, you can get on 540-632-0160. Leave a question, comment. We'll put you in an episode. We did it a lot last season. We'll keep doing it this year. Also, hey, check out all our socials at Duke FB coverage. We're practically everywhere you purvey your social media. And also check out our companion podcast project, the Classical Antiquity Side Quest. Follow us on Twitter at AntiquityPod. And that podcast, the Side Quest, is everywhere you get your podcast. It covers topics from the period of classical antiquity, which covers ancient Greece and Rome. And we try to drop episodes there once a month, every 15th of the month. Give it a listen. I think you'll enjoy it. If not, just keep listening until you like it. He also has a podcast with the landlord, Sheldon Williams, on the Believe Network, Believe in Duke. It is a fantastic podcast. You should listen to it. If you don't know by now, I think you all know who my next guest is.
Steve Wiseman, how are you, sir?
I am doing well. It's a beautiful summer day in the Triangle. Spent my morning at Duke football practice, so it's not a bad way to make a living.
Well, good. We'll get into that in just a second, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take a minute to ask you what happened with Kyle Filipowski? What happened with Flip and the Jazz and the draft and the wild and craziness? What was going on there?
Yeah, he I mean, I think he dropped, mainly there were some holes in his game. I mean, we knew that watching him on the regular in terms of him being a pro, right? Um, at times he wasn't as strong with the ball in the paint as I think a lot of Duke fans would have liked, a lot of coaches would have liked. I think as Flip would have liked, but that was one knock on him. I think you're referring to the off the court stuff, maybe. Um,
Perhaps, perhaps.
if you want to get into that, I can a little bit. I know some things. Um, there's some, he's basically estranged from his family over his girlfriend or his now fiance, who he got engaged to her um, a few months ago, and so there's some issues between his family and her, and he decided he didn't want them in his life anymore. He wanted her. He chose that's who he wanted to get married to and all that. So um, he hasn't really had a relationship with his family in about a year and a half. So it's kind of
Hmm.
sad. Everybody agrees it's sad. You don't want to see that, but he's an adult and gets to make those kind of choices, right? So that's kind of where it is.
So they've been out of the loop for a year and a half. It's kind of interesting that none of this came out while he was at Duke, which indicates that staff runs a tight ship and knows how to keep stuff in-house, internal. What was it that finally caused it to break loose at this point in time?
Yeah, his family reached out to some reporters, and I had a lot of conversations with them um, earlier this year, and um, I will say that it wasn't completely kept under wraps. I mean, those of us who were on the road with the team, and you know what I'm saying, like we saw her, she was around a lot, and she's his girlfriend. They weren't engaged yet, but she's been around for both years he's been there, so um, that part of it was kind of an open secret kind of thing, right? She was there, and that there were some issues. We did notice that the family wasn't around, right, in places where I thought they would have been, like in Brooklyn at the NCAA tournament when Duke opened there, right, against they played JMU, and um, the family wasn't there, and they live, you know, 30 miles north of there, so that was unusual. So, those kind of things were going on, and mostly it was kind of a family thing, and that's kind of the choice we took as a. I'll speak for me and my organization. It seemed like a kind of a family deal that we didn't feel like we could get all sides of the story to report it. So the decision was made by me and by people above me in some deep conversations to not pursue it any further unless we could get more information on the complete story there. So what I've told you is what I was able to report and glean. Um, and Kyle and his fiance didn't want to talk about it, and they just decided to just go about their lives and not engage in their not they didn't want to air their family dirty laundry or whatever. That's what it is. Uh, his family chose to, and that's their right. And it came out back to, I guess I'm rambling here. I don't mean to ramble. I'm trying to talk through all this with you. Um, the family, his mom and his brother, kind of posted on social media during the draft. And and it was noticeable at the draft. I mean, Kyle's there with Caitlin, his fiance. John Shire's there, a couple of people from Duke Athletics, and the table's empty. There's no family there from either, from his fiance, from him. And again, the draft's in Brooklyn, right? It's right there, right where he's from. He's from the north of the city. He lives on a farm, so it's not like he's from Brooklyn, but you know what I'm trying to say. He's from that area. It wouldn't have been extraordinary travel circumstances for his family to come to the draft, and which is what you expect him to be, right? It's a celebration of all he's been through. And they weren't there. So that was kind of noticeable as well.
So I'm just kind of walking through this in the head, through my head, walking through all of it in my head. And the one thing that stood out to me was the age difference between him and his fiance when that started to come out. It wasn't clear to me exactly how much older she was. It was kind of like we got a range. Was that ever, how much older is she than Flip?
I mean, my understanding is 7 years. Um, that it, the families had known each other in the past. The two moms formerly worked together at some point in the past, and so the families were, they knew each other. They've known as the kids were growing up, they all kind of knew each other. So
Okay. Now, as I'm going through this thinking in my head, 7 years, she was with them all 2 years in college. When did they start dating?
my understanding was second semester of his senior year of high school.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm just going to leave that one at that and we'll move on from there.
Okay.
One one question about conference restructuring. Are we still in a only God and maybe not even God knows what's going to happen with all this? I mean, I gave up trying to make sense of the lawsuits because there's three or four going on at one time, which is not how the law is supposed to work. It seems really backwards. And it just seems like a total mess at this point. Do you have any sort of insight as to whether the ACC is going to blow up between the time we're recording this and the time I post it?
I would be stunned if that happened, given everything that's going on in the court system right now. The ACC is not willing to back. If Clemson and Florida State are pushing for a settlement by pushing this into the court system, trying to force the ACC's hand, Jim Phillips isn't doing it, and the ACC isn't doing it. They're going to fight this with every step they have, and um and go about it that way. So I don't anticipate this being solved anytime soon. I'm thinking we're talking years, not months. So, but when things get in the court system, as you know more than I do, things happen. There has
Well,
to be a breaking point, right? That's what it always comes to.
well, I did this on another podcast I was on, and I tried to create a Venn diagram of, that's how you get cases settled is you find one side's position, the other side's position, and you look for overlap between the two. I don't see any overlap between what FSU and Clemson apparently want and what the ACC would be willing to give up. I, if it were two different schools, and I'm not going to name any schools in particular, but if it were two different schools, maybe.
Mhm.
I just don't see how you can resolve that. And plus, you're what, 6-ish months away from when ESPN has to make its decision about extending the deal, which I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but it seems like the reason that there's a push to get out and get out now on the part of these two schools is because they must be concerned that ESPN is going to extend the deal.
Right, and lock them in further. Yeah, which we kind of all thought it was through 2036 anyway. So, yeah, it looked on the outside without. Now those documents are out. They, thanks to the Florida Attorney General, we've seen a little bit more than what we'd seen before. So I'm going to say, as a purveyor of facts and a lover of the sunshine rules, I'm appreciative of the Florida Attorney General getting those things released. But yes, yeah, Florida State and Clemson don't want to be locked in any more than they already are. And so obviously that's why they want to, again, they want to push to a breaking point, right? They want to try to get this, make enough noise, make enough stink that the ACC will just tell, okay, we'll take some money, you can go away. But the ACC, look, from their point of view, they don't want to do that at all because they want ESPN to re-up the deal at what it is now or more, maybe, right? They obviously like to get more, probably a long shot, but they'd like to. If Clemson and Florida State aren't there, they sure as heck aren't getting more. So they have no incentive to settle, zero incentive to settle.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And then you got these rumors that are going around with the Pac 2 schools, and God only knows what'll happen there and how that'll affect everything. And I mean, it's just a complete mess. But let's move away from that just weirdness and crazy topic, because anytime you discuss it, it just makes your head spin, to something that's hopefully a little bit easier to get a handle on and make sense of, which is the Blue Devils and their 2024 football season that we've got coming up. Why don't we start with this? You said you were at practice today. I'm sure you saw the same spring game, probably more of it than I did. What are the main areas of concern for the Blue Devils coming into this season?
Well, given all they lost on the offensive line, that's a good place to start because you lost a first round pick. You lost Jacob Bunk, who's played a lot of games, right? So Jake Hornibrook, that other tackle, was experienced. But again, before I get past the butt there, the spring game is a good example. They only have like seven linemen, right? So you couldn't even have a game. And we were talking about this morning with the offensive coordinator, Jonathan Brewer. You they couldn't run, they couldn't run a defense. The defense couldn't run against them, and they had to run all passing plays. They couldn't do running plays in the spring so much because you didn't have a full line to work against it. So it's different now because they've all these transfers have come in and the incoming freshmen and all that. So that's been a better thing. So I still I said that's the main area of concern just because there's so much uncertainty there and because he lost so much from last year. But I think they've brought in people that can help, and they have Matt Craycroft is back, who played some last year. You saw him. Brian Parker filled in for Barton a little bit and played some at both tackles last year as a redshirt freshman. I was able to talk to him today at the after practice some, and he's a guy that's going to be a mainstay on that line for it looks like for 2 or 3 years now. So um, that's another good quality thing. But it's just some uncertainty, right? And it's such an important area because if your line is terrible, I don't care what kind of skill guys you got, you're not going to you're not going to get anywhere. So you got to be strong there. And again, they brought in some transfers in the offseason, Division One guys, UCLA, Northwestern, um, Stanford, big Division One, Power Five programs. So there's a good chance that it'll be okay, but I got to see it. I got to see it in games.
That's, I think, every Duke fan's concern is how is the O line going to do, and will they get better as the season goes on? And maybe they start off a little slow, but boy, are they going to need to grow up fast, because we'll get to that key 4 week stretch in their season here in a little bit. And I think we all know what 4 weeks we're referring to here. But let's switch from the maybe areas of concern or unknowns to strengths. What should Duke fans feel confident about, and what do the coaches feel confident about headed into the season?
Well, um, I think they're okay at quarterback. I'm going to start there, even though you lost Riley Leonard, which is you know, that's a shot, right? But Grayson Loftus played pretty well last year, if it's him. But really, you brought in Malik Murphy, who started 2 games for Texas last year and has a big arm and is a physical, specimen. He's a great looking quarterback, and that's a big get for Duke. That's not let's more than I do. That's not the kind of athletes that Duke can usually get in football, right? The high profile things and different world now with NIL and everything, but they got it done. So he's him in the play. He's got to win the job, and I would be surprised if he doesn't. But if he doesn't, that means Grayson Loftus has outplayed him. And we saw what Grayson Loftus could do at times last year as a freshman who got thrown in there when he wasn't expected to play. He was third string, halfway through the season, and then injuries made him the starter. So to me, that puts him in pretty strong position at quarterback. I got other areas I'll talk about if you want to react to that. Yeah, I think quarterback's pretty good.
Yeah, I think I've told people this on some other appearances. I've said don't overlook Loftus. I mean, Grayson Loftus has some ability, and there's something about him. And I was talking with Connor O'Neill about this a couple of months ago, and he said he just thinks some way, somehow, Loftus will find a way to play. Maybe it's not this season, but there's just it's hard for him to believe that Loftus is not going to get back on the field at Duke. And it'll be interesting to see what he can do and Murphy both can do. And what I understand is going to be a wide open, throw the ball, spread them out offensive system. Is that right?
That's right. The power spread is how it's been described to me. They're going to play faster, even more. It's more tempo. It's big time tempo football, and so they want to get the ball down the field. Um, Murphy's got the arm to do that. Loftus has a little better accuracy. What I saw today, and I've seen into a couple of practices. Um, he knows. I mean, he knows the players he's throwing to more than Malik Murphy does. I mean, that's just from a extra year of working with him. But that doesn't mean Murphy's, uncorking the ball over the field. I'm just saying that's the difference that I've seen analyzing those two quarterbacks.
And so we've got running backs too, who should be able to help move the ball down the field, even being down Jordan Waters.
Right, and that was an unfortunate move there. I mean, I think that would have really set this offense up to be really special. But Jack has more. That was a big decision by him. He entered the portal and he saw what was out there and saw what Duke had gotten as a new coach after Otto left. He got Manny Diaz and all that, and he decided to come back. So that's a big get. He's a good running back. He can help him make up the difference of not having Jordan Waters. And then they brought in a couple of grad transfers there too as well. And you got uh, Peyton. I'm sorry, he's
Peyton Jones.
Peyton Jones. I also want to say Stone. I'm sorry, I got names in my head. Peyton Jones, who played some as a true freshman last year and has speed and we like they like what they see with him. And so I think they've got enough at running back, to get by. And then they've got, I mean, Jordan Moore is one of the top receivers in the ACC, and he's set to have a big year too. So you've got weapons on offense. You do. You have enough weapons to get things done.
Well, do we think Peyton Jones is going to get more carries? Because when he played, he looked good. And I'm not saying the other guys don't look good, but Jones will be a sophomore, and he seemed to take advantage of the limited opportunities he got.
He does, and I do think we'll see him carry the ball more. I think Moore will be the main runner, but in college football, you always use two or three running backs. Again, that's why they brought in the guys, the transfers, to try to have some depth there. Just people get hurt, running backs get hurt, take a pounding, and but I think Peyton's got a future. Peyton Jones has a future. He's a really good. That was a really good recruit by Elko that this staff was able to retain. Everybody was a free agent last year, right? So anybody that came back, they retained them. So that was a good get.
Well, what do we think about Eli Pankel coming back? And I'm not trying to be critical of the other receivers, but it just seemed like we could not replace what he brought to the table in Elko's first year, which would be 2022. When Pankel went out in 2023, we could not find a way to replace it. How is he looking?
He's going to help him quite a bit. That was another big decision. Him getting healthy again and coming back. You got two experienced guys with him and more. I really think and we've seen Eli play. He's a really good athlete. He was a great basketball player in Indiana. Could have been a Division One basketball player probably if he wanted to be. Maybe not the ACC level, but he could have played. And so that's the kind of athlete we're talking about here. He went through a serious injury, and but he's come back strong, and he's going to make a difference. And I also, if we can slide over a little bit, talk about tight end. Nicky Dalmolin deciding to come back is another help in the passing game. I'm talking about him in relation to the catching the ball part of the tight end game because I'm writing a story about him for the News and Observer. I'll be out probably later this week. He decided he went through senior day last year. He was done with football. He played his 4 years at Duke. He was a really good tight end. Um, and and then he came out to spring practice and he saw what they were doing and talked to Brewer and was like, you guys throw the ball to the tight end a little more than what maybe we did the last couple of years. And so he decided to come back and play another year of football. He had his COVID year. He played his 4 years, but he had his freshman year is 2020. So he had his COVID year available, his fifth year, and he decided to use it at Duke. So he graduated. Now he's going to grad school. He's got one more year. And so they're going to use him. He's going to be, uh, that 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 release valve over the middle, right? That tight ends always could be. And we've seen, Duke use that a lot over the years. And so that's another thing that's going to add to the passing game, along with Eli Pankel.
Well, like a lot of us have said about Miami, I'll believe it when I see it. I've heard that we're going to use the tight ends for a long time. And it feels like since about, oh God, what was it? When Braxton Deaver got
Yeah,
hurt was
yeah,
the last time between him and Reeves, we threw to them a fair amount. And then after Deaver got hurt, it just like it stopped. And
Daniel Helm a little bit. Daniel
yeah,
Helm a little bit. Remember him? And he
yeah,
ended up in the NFL for a while. So
yeah. Well, I mean, Noah Gray is the biggest
and Noah Gray.
how. I mean, we never threw to him in the end zone while he was a Duke. I just that just boggles my mind. So I hope you're right. I really hope you're right.
Well, that may
And
be more of an indictment on the former offensive staff. Let's say.
right. Well, I mean, I let me put it this way. I'm sure someone from the Duke staff is listening. I know they're good about listening to podcasts, and I know they're good about seeing what's going on the social media. The athletic department's very good about that. So you have a skeptic here in me. Prove me wrong, please, for the love of God. Prove me wrong.
That's
Okay.
okay. That's what this is, man. Skepticism. That's part of the deal here, man. Sometimes you got to prove it.
So let me ask you one thing that we have not been as strong in over the years, with the exception of against Georgia Tech when I think it was Samir Hagan's returning kicks, if I remember that game correctly, and then that stopped.
Yeah.
Okay,
Whew.
I somebody can explain that to me one day. Perhaps is the reason for that. I don't understand why he was not made the permanent kick returner. Um, what is our return game going to look like? Who is going to be returning kicks and punts for us?
So, Jalen Stinson uh, can return things. He's had a pretty good run there. Um, a little bit there. Um, yeah, I'm not as sure on that yet because it's early in practice and they
Okay.
haven't had the first scrimmage yet. So I'm going to hold on. I'm not in a position to give you a really strong answer on that today.
Right. And I'm not.
I know, John Tavis Robertson's still on the team.
Mhm.
He has experience doing it, but not great experience. So, um, again, this staff is, open book kind of thing. Like, okay, everybody's out there, everybody can prove it. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you can do. Let's see if you can be a weapon.
Right. And to be clear, I wasn't trying to be critical of Stinson, but I felt like for a while after Crowder left, understandably, we weren't able to get back as a team to that level. We had guys, Ramming was never really that great at it. He always tried to make too many moves, and it just felt like we struggled to get maybe the right guy returning at times. And when Hagens came in against Tech, it was like, oh, okay, well maybe this is the guy, and then they went away from it, and
Right.
I've never been able to figure that one out at all.
Terry Moore did some work in the kick return game, and he's, former running back, and now he's playing safety, just like Jalen Stinson is. So that's another guy that, could be solid out there. We'll see. We'll see what he does, as practice goes on here. But yeah, it's maybe I think Peyton Jones has the moves to, get him the ball. If you're not going to have him be your running back all the time because you have other guys, which I understand, okay, you got something there in him, right? You've got some shiftiness, you got some speed. Let's see what he can do, maybe.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how the staff's doing. You're getting to know them, I'm sure, and getting building a rapport and a relationship with them. Tell us a little bit about the staff. Are they settled in? Are they ready to go? Do they seem to have a good rhythm, pulse of the team? Where are they?
Yeah, they seem to be, and it helps that some of them, have worked with Manny Diaz in the past, right? So that's good. And the key to this staff really, and it's funny because usually strength coaches are underrated. David Feely has been underrated, but now everybody seems to know who he is now. So David Feely is the key part of that staff, and Manny Diaz, having worked with him at Miami, and the ability to retain him, I think eases the loss of Elko and all the great staff that he had and everything, and what they did the last 2 years. So all these players come into practice, come into the camp here, and we talked to them this last week, how how confident they feel, how strong they feel, how good they feel on the field, and you know they talk to guys who've gone to other schools, and they say, "Wow, I didn't realize how good it was at Duke. That how good David Feely was. We knew it was good, but we didn't realize until we went somewhere else. And they talk to their friends who are at other places now. So to me, right, as we talk about the staff, he's the one I want to make sure and mention. He's kind of the glue here. A lot of people know him. They look to him. He's really important. And so at some point, it's going to be like, okay, he's not underrated anymore. He is the guy. David Feely is the most well-known strength coach, and whatever goes right, he gets a lot of credit for, and we'll see if they can continue it here in this season too.
All right. So Coach Diaz as a whole, does he seem I mean, coming back to the ACC after what happened at Miami, does he seem relaxed? Does he seem on edge? Does he seem just comfortable? Where is he? Let's armchair psychology him for a little bit here. Where is he right now?
Yeah, I've gotten to spend a little bit of time with him away from the field, in more relaxed settings, and um, he's determined. He's determined to win, and he figured that another chance was going to come. He was, let's face it, he was handled pretty shoddily at Miami. I don't think anybody can deny that. Uh, he'd had winning teams, but just not to the level they wanted. So it's the level they want, but they sure haven't reached it for a long time, and a lot of coaches. But I don't want to go off on that tangent. I just want to set that as a baseline. Like he was confident he's going to get another job as a head coach, and he went to Penn State and did good work there, and so it was just ready, and so he's glad to be back in the ACC. He knows the league. Um, he hasn't said anything straight out like, "Hey, I can't wait to shove it to Miami," but you'd be a fool not to believe that's in his mind. I mean, come on, everybody's human. Everybody's got an ego, right? Everybody's got pride, and so I think he's glad to be. He probably wishes the old Coastal Division was still in place because he could play Miami every year, but that's not the case anymore.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I mean, I think he got in a good spot. I think he landed in a good spot. This could be a little bit of a tough year because of all the people who left that we talked about. And the ones we haven't talked about, Aeneas Peebles, uh, that was a big loss.
Yes.
Dwayne Carter, Jamion Franklin, Jalen Calhoun, years and years of starters and experience, which is what
Grant Barton, Jacob Monk. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
yeah, we go on for a long time. Porter Wilson, I mean,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
gone. So it's a tough spot that he's in at Duke in particular. If he were at another school, maybe it's not as big of a deal. But I kind of feel like with his experience of what had happened at Miami and learning under Coach Franklin at Penn State and being around a lot of success, he could kind of come in and have sort of a Cutcliffe style rejuvenation and a second chapter in his career that could go very well. And I
Yep.
hope it does. But I think for this season, for it to go very well, it's those 4 games in between the 2 bye weeks. So in between October 12 and November 16. For those of you who are listening to this, furiously pulling up the Duke schedule, let me just read it off one by one. Home against Florida State on October 18. Home against SMU, which is not going to be a cakewalk,
Right.
on October 26th. Down to Hard Rock Stadium to face Miami in front of 3,000 fans. And then what is shaping up to be an extraordinarily difficult game on November 9th on the road at Carter Finley against NC State.
Yep.
That seems like that's going to be the make or break point for Duke this season. Am I wrong about that?
You're absolutely right. And it comes, between 2 bye weeks, so you couldn't ask for a better setup that way if you're going to have that tough stretch. Because by that point, you know who you are, you know what you do well. You've had a week to get ready for Florida State. Well, it's a short week to play on Friday, but you know what I mean. They'll have the week off ahead of that, so that's good. No, well, it's a short week coming off a bye, but anyway, if they get the extra week, which is good, so uh, that's fine. And SMU won the American last year. They're a good program. They're going to come in this league. I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC by any stretch, but they're going to be competitive. They'll be a competitive team. So that's going to be a tough game. And then you have to go to Miami, which has all the talent in the world again, and and we'll see how that turns out by that point in the year. Uh, and then you're going over to Raleigh, where you really embarrassed the Wolfpack last year. That loss, and
Loved it.
and yeah, for Duke point of view, 24-3, and it was
Beautiful.
never a ball game. And I remember talking to Coach Elko the week after that and saying okay, and he said this was one of the settings where we were kind of, we could talk freely, just kind of sharing some ideas about that. I kind of asked him about Dave Doran, and he said Dave Doran was, when I met him for the handshake after that game, he said they were in shock. They were in shock they had gotten manhandled by Duke like that. And to their credit, on that end, on the red NC State side, they turned it around and had a strong finish to the season when it looked like they were heading toward, they were in the ditch, and that game kind of woke them up. So I lead all that into the game over there will be tough because they want to kick Duke's tail, and they want to make up for last year, and that's going to be on their minds. There's no question. So that's a hell of a stretch of football right there for Duke, without a doubt.
Well, and there were a lot of really good plays in that game, but certainly, as we called it online, the felony murder double move by Jalen Calhoun to
Yes.
get open on that 69-yard touchdown catch. I broke it down for I think it was Brian with the Section 17 guys on Twitter. I was like, no, no, no. The first move was the felony. The second move was the murder. That's why he should get out of Dodge fast. But
First
that,
degree.
yeah, it was certainly premeditated. There's no question about that. They had malice aforethought, as we used to say
Yeah.
in law school.
Yeah.
It was a great game, but NC State, I know Ovius and Giglio have said NC State stuff is dead. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. this is a year that if I were an NC State fan, I would be sweating bullets coming into this season because it's lined up for you to do well. And that historically is when you struggle.
That's right. That's right. They're going to be in the top 25 preseason. They're in the USA Today. Came out this afternoon. The AP poll comes out next week, which I vote on, and I had them in there, and I think a lot of my fellow voters will. So they're going to be kind of the it team. That's like not Florida State and Miami and Clemson are up here, and but watch out for NC State. They're watch NC State with a bullet. They may be. So yeah. So you don't know what you're going to be facing in November when that game comes. To bring it back to a Duke perspective here, I know they're going to be angry, but if they have injuries or their season's in the tank at that point, they've lost the games they shouldn't have lost. Who knows? Kind of like when you go down to Miami. If they've lost the games at that point, they may just pack it in. They tend to
They
do that.
don't kneel. Yeah.
That can make this. We're talking about this murderous row of games. They
Right.
could not be, but chances are they will be. I mean, that's right. This it lines up to be a tough stretch, which is what we started talking about here. That's the point of the season where if you're going to be a 6 or 7 win team or you're going to be an 8 or 9 win team, that those 4 games right there are going to decide it. If you go 1-3 or 3-1, right, that's the difference.
Well, and looking though, we could learn a lot about this team to go out of that murderer's row stretch by week 2 when we'll see the Blue Devils go on the road to Northwestern.
Yep.
It's a much different Northwestern team in week 2 than when Duke faced them last year. And looking at those first 6 games, Elon, Northwestern, UConn, Middle Tennessee, Carolina, that Georgia Tech game is going to be tough. That
Yeah. Yep.
they're
On
going
the
to be
road.
good.
Yep.
But the line between 3-3 and 4-2 is thin for those 6 games. But if Duke comes out of that 4-2, they could be looking at a good season.
Absolutely. And then that's when you go into the other 4 games when we see if they can build on that or if they fall back. I mean, it's not outside the realm of possibility that Duke could be 5-1. I mean, that's a chance because those 4 non-conference games aren't. You don't have Notre Dame in there like last year. You don't have that. You have to go to Middle Tennessee. I get it; it's a road game, but even the last time they went over there in 2019, Duke, kind of manhandled Middle. You saw the difference between Power Five and Group of Five on that night. I remember. Speaking of Jalen Calhoun, he had a big game that night. I think he had 2 touchdowns. That was in Murfreesboro. So, yeah. So it is set up for Duke to kind of ease into the Manny Diaz and kind of do some things here, get off to a good start. Um, 2 years ago, in Elko's first year, the Northwestern game in the second week is the one where Duke went in there and won. They had a big lead, and Northwestern came down and scored at the end, and Duke stopped the 2 point or whatever it was. You know, um, but they did it on the road, and it was like, whoa, okay, this team is better. Wow, okay. When Elko's done something here, at that point they opened up by beating Temple 30-0. Just you know, the difference in talent was so striking. But going into Northwestern and winning, that ended up being a bad Northwestern team. I think they only won 1 game or 2 games that year, but we didn't know that at the time. So that brings me back to this year. The second game at Northwestern is going to tell us a lot because you open up with Elon. We know what should happen there. The second week's where we're going to see what this team's made of going on the road to a Big Ten team.
Yeah, and then you've got UConn and Middle Tennessee, so you're thinking probably worst case scenario 3-1.
Right.
The Carolina game, that's not a bad time to catch Carolina because I'm trying to remember the podcast episode that I did with the Heel Brothers as part of the College Huddle Network. I mean, look at their schedule. They've got Minnesota on the road to start. Then they play Charlotte. Then they play North Carolina Central. James Madison, though, with the coaching change, we'll have to see how good James Madison is. But Carolina gets James Madison at home, not on
Right.
the road. That's big. So it could be a big Duke coming to Duke could be a big, big game for Carolina, probably the first big game of the season. And we'll be there with a group of people. So hopefully we'll put an end to that streak. But the Georgia Tech game on the road is going to be tough. That's not going to be an easy game.
That's not an easy one to bounce back off of a rivalry game, even though the rivalry game's at home, which is good. It's where you want to play them. But Duke needs to beat Carolina. again. It's been a while, and that they've been, you know, razor thin games the last 2 years. Before that, it was not competitive for a while, but it's gotten back to where it's a really competitive, fun game. The last 2 years have been incredible games. I know not fun for Duke fans, but they have been incredible games. And um, referees and all that. We'll talk about all that. But anyway, from a Duke perspective, it's one that it's time to beat Carolina again. If you really need to do that to establish. And there's a lot of buzz around over there about Mac Brown. He's 73 years old. How long is he going to do this? Why is he still doing this? Um, uh, he came back here to build that program up, and he's done it from where they were under Fedora, but not to where he wants it to be, and not to where their recruiting says they should have been with two straight NFL quarterbacks, Sam Howell and Drake May, and they haven't really capitalized on that, uh, frankly. And so, if they would happen to lose at Minnesota or somehow lose to James Madison at home, you know, there's going to be like buzz around that program again. Uh-oh, is this it for Mac? You know, and Mac hasn't lost to Duke since the scoreboard game, right? 1989, the Steve Spurrier. Isn't that right?
Say that one more time.
I think
Oh,
the last
Mac
time
Brown. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah, it
last
was a
time he
scoreboard
lost to
game.
Duke
Yeah,
was the game where Spurrier took the photo of the scoreboard in Chapel Hill.
that's right.
So he hasn't forgotten that. And so he likes to beat Duke. Uh, and so it's important to him. But I'm just kind of trying to build this up. If Duke would happen to win, it could be the final nail in the coffin of him, like okay, not the literal coffin, but the coaching coffin.
Well, I think Diaz might have some revenge thoughts about Carolina and Mac Brown and the history at Texas, but
Yep.
we'll
There's
see.
a lot of storylines.
I'm just thinking about it in my mind. If Carolina really struggles this year after doing nothing, relatively speaking, with two NFL quarterbacks, it reminds me of the line from Bender that Bender had in Futurama. Comedy's a dead art form. Now, tragedy, that's funny. So let's hope for some funny tragedy there. Now, last couple of topics. I've gotten some emails from Duke football. I actually got a call from the Iron Dukes. I got to call them back. So I got to get on that. But
All
it
right.
seems like with the Yo Center, with the in-stadium tailgating area that's being put out there, there's a whole, hey, we're committed. We want to be one of the best. Is that the vibe that everybody's feeling, that there's a real commitment to the football program?
No question. No question. And it got started when they hired Elko. And then after the first year, obviously, after he had that great year, he could have pursued and gotten other jobs if he wanted to after the first year. And he didn't. And there were a lot of promises made then. He got a new contract. A lot of it, though, was infrastructure. They knew the Yo Center locker room needed a massive overhaul, and they finally got that. They've been working on that for a couple of years, and they finally got the work done. Um, Duke is very deliberative. I think you know that. They plan, they make sure the money's in hand before they start a project and things. So it takes a little while, but they got it done. Kind of like with when they rebuilt the stadium 10 years ago, right? Talking about it for a while, and they got all the money and they did it, and it looks great. And so now they're doing this with the locker room and with the party deck idea. Um, why not? I know it lowers seating by 5,000, whatever. Just
That's
another amenity.
fine. That's fine. That's
I know.
Believe me, we'll be better off without those 5,000 seats.
I hear you, and you'll have that area for people to gravitate to. Maybe and it's an extra, $45, $55 a ticket to be in there. It's extra revenue. It's all about revenue and stuff like that. So, but the bottom line is yes, they are not like, okay, cool. We went to a couple of bowl games. Great. Now we got Manny Diaz. Let's see what he can do. It's no, we got Manny Diaz, and we're going to invest in this program that Mike Elko resuscitated after things got out of hand at the end of Cutcliffe's time. That Cutcliffe rebuilt in a very strong manner, and then it got away. Elko built it back up now, and now Manny has to take it and go from there. So
Right. And I think the biggest part of it is clearly the Bull City football logo that they have now on their helmets. And guys, again, Bull City on the helmets, Bowl city coordinators, follow the accounts. Come on. Whoever's running your account, make it happen. Okay.
See, see,
See, we got to have that occur. I mean, come on, come on now. So, well, I think that that's all great, and I think things. I feel like there's cautious optimism about how this team can do this season, in large part because of the depth issues and the unknowns. But I don't think people are coming into this like we'll be, 3-9 or 4-8 or like that. It's like, hey, maybe it's 5 wins, but it's going to be a good fighting 5-7 team because it's a tough schedule. Maybe you can get up to 7 wins, but if Duke goes to a bowl game this year, I mean, everybody would be ecstatic, right?
absolutely. And think about it. We're coming into the season, and you just said it like nobody's talking 3-9, 4-8, which for several years there, that was what we were talking about, right? And that's not where we are anymore. Even coming into Elko's first year, we didn't know what they were going to do. I thought they were going to be 3-9 and 4-8 that year. I had no idea. None of us did. And so that's how it's turned around again. And now they seem to have kind of a floor. Like they shouldn't fall off the table and go have a 2-10 or 3-9 at the way things are going. I mean, obviously massive injuries, anything can happen, but it, they have enough talent to where that shouldn't be. And um, the schedule the way it is, again, those are four very winnable non-conference games. That gets you four right there. You only got to win two conference games. You're bowl eligible. So 6, 7 wins. I mean, 5-7 should be like that should be the bottom. A lot of things have to go wrong for them to finish 5-7, and so I think you should be a 7 or 8 win team this year. And that's even losing Riley Leonard, and you're saying that, right? That's a pretty strong thing.
Well, part of the reason I was thinking five, a range of 5 to 7, is just because that offensive line can take a while to gel.
It
And
can.
it just seems like that's such a big question mark. But again, Elon, UConn, Middle Tennessee, between North Carolina and Georgia Tech, you got to figure you're going to steal one. So that gets you to about four. Maybe if you beat Northwestern, you're at five. And then that murderer's row stretch, you figure at least one of those games you're going to get a
Right.
win. You're looking at six, and then you playing the schedule lottery champions in Virginia Tech, or
Yeah.
well, I guess Syracuse won it for everybody, but Virginia Tech got a good one. But so maybe you lose that one, but you should be able to beat Wake this year. So you
Yeah.
7 wins is not outside the realm of possibility, I don't think.
It's not. It's not heavy lifting. It's really not. And that's why, remember last year, the schedule was so tough with Clemson and Florida State and Notre Dame and all that. And to go to a bowl game in that year and the season they had,
With the
that was
injuries.
really that was an accomplishment, man. That was with all the injuries too. And that tells you where the program is now. Because with that kind of schedule and with the injuries they had, that team could have easily been 4-8, right? And they did it. They took care of Clemson. That was
And
the big thing, and so went from there.
and you wonder, not to play, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but if Beelan's arm hadn't been injured, or his shoulder or whatever upper
Yeah,
body he
yeah,
suffered, and you don't end up with Loftus having to be very limited in what he's allowed to do so they protect him so he doesn't get hurt. And then
right.
you kind of turn him loose in the fourth quarter. It could have been a very different season, but this year with enough of the weapons that Duke has, I mean, if you get to 7 wins or above that, I mean, that's a heck of a year and a really, really good start for Coach
It is.
Diaz.
It
Uh,
is. And you mentioned Henry and his arm. I have to say, referencing back to the double murder move, the double felony. That may have been the last. That was the last ball that Henry really threw last year because his arm kind of. That was all he had. He was hurt before that. That kind of, you could argue it was worth it because it was a hell of a play and it led him to that big win. So, but anyway, just to kind of put that into context, that wasn't a throw he was probably equipped to make, but he did it, and it took a lot out of him. So,
Hell, it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and he's got a great family, which we were fortunate enough to meet down at the bowl game, and just
yeah,
good people. And hopefully, we'll see him back healthy and playing. But we'll see. You've been kind enough to come on again, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you doing it. You know the drill. I'd love to give you I give every guest an open mic, so I'm going to give you an open mic, and I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Newsobserver.com, Raleigh News Observer website. I'll be on the Duke beat again this year. I have some editing duties now, so I kind of try to take care of everybody and do a lot of things there. Obviously, I know this is a football. We're getting ready for the basketball season. It's going to be an exciting year. Our coverage of that team is going to be unmatched by anybody as far as, I'll be at all the games and things like that. So look for that. I do have the feature coming up on Nicky Dalmolin if you want to kind of learn about his decision process there and kind of what went into it. And that whole back and forth. To me, that's always interesting when somebody has decided to walk away from a sport and then they get a call back. When I covered the NFL, I kind of used to like to do those kind of stories about guys that were washing dishes or something like that, right? Then they end up in the NFL. So Nicky is a good kid, and we've known him for a while. So look for that story for sure. And also, our coverage of what we talked about earlier, the ACC machinations, the what's going on there. Andrew Carter from our staff is really plugged in and knows he talks to a lot of people all the time and follows that and is following things through the court system, and he'll have regular updates on that and kind of how the season is going to go, how it will be with Cal and Stanford and SMU in the league. But I appreciate you having me on, Ben. Also, I still do the Believe in Duke podcast with Sheldon Williams. We're going to get that cranked up again now as we get closer to basketball season. That's more of a basketball podcast, so we kind of take a little break in the off season. But so that's going to be fun. Maybe Sheldon, maybe we'll talk a little bit about JJ Redick. Now that he's a coach, maybe he'll have some things to say about JJ.
Uh, you know, uh, JJ's from Roanoke, where I am, and where I am now, and um, thing I want to support a Roanoke guy, even though he was out in the county, okay, and I'm in
Mhm.
the city. But coaches who have coached with LeBron James have very short shelf lives.
Right.
So, and LeBron is on a world domination tour right now at the Olympics. So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Reddick, uh, don't get rid of your Rolodex. Keep the names of the ESPN people in your phone. You may
Yeah.
be back doing that sooner than you think.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for coming back on. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your coverage as always. You're a tremendous asset. You help us inform all the Duke listeners, and I know this is going to be a very, very well listened to episode. And I will look forward to having you back on as the season continues, and Duke hopefully has a great year. Folks, you know where to find us, bullcitycoordinators.com. Follow us on the socials at Duke FB Coverage. We are everywhere you get your podcast. And as always, go Duke.